Yeah, so one of the things that has really interested me since writing the book and talking with other survivors of the school I went to is this whole notion of, I mean, we call it the effects of child abuse or child sexual abuse, but I call it a legacy because it's something that lasts through the lifetime. And certainly people like Wab Kinew, for example, the new premier of Manitoba, his father was a survivor of the Indigenous residential schools, and he wrote a book on how his father's legacy led to him having problems. So the legacy gets passed on from generation to generation. And when I was young, when I was in high school, I started developing all kinds of stomach problems, anxiety problems, depression, crying, and so on, and had no idea why. And when I went to my mother, she took me to the doctor for the first of a couple of barium enemas to see what my gut told them. I now know that's not very good to do because it's radioactive. Um, but they came up with she's probably like her father because my father was anxious, somewhat agoraphobic, like fear of going out, in a job he hated, and he was on anti-anxiety pills. So was my mother, but my mother never related it back to her. So I think they kind of sloughed it off as I inherited some kind of nervous condition from my father, and no wonder she's got these issues. So nothing was ever asked at that time what might have been in Karen's past that could contribute to this kind of thing. Now, I know there was lack of knowledge back then as well, but then when the same type of thing started happening in university, it was in my second year, um, horrifying nightmares where I had to get out of my room in residence and just pace the hall until I wasn't afraid anymore to go back to my room. I was terrified in the middle of the night to go back to my residence room. Um, and also just nervousness, the same kinds of things that I had in high school, just depression, discontent, nightmares, stomach problems, a whole slew of things. And they, in the university health clinic, they sent me to uh, just one of their counselors that they had at the university. Um, the sexual abuse was never, ever discussed. I didn't bring it up, and they didn't ask if anything traumatic like that had happened to me. And so I was also put on some very high-powered antipsychotic drugs, which I stopped taking after a week because I wasn't awake most of the day. And how was that supposed to help with these issues? I mean, it just didn't.
Uh-huh.
And I had panic attacks in my third year. Um, and they said panic attacks don't go away by themselves, but actually mine did. I just moved on to other symptoms. Uh,
Right.
and nobody, no doctor, nobody, no counselor ever asked me about the possibility of childhood sexual abuse. And
Or even trauma, or did they ask about stress?
well, stress was just you
Like
inherited
present
it
day.
from your dad, and
Okay,
you're
yeah.
at university, you're afraid you're going to fail if you
Mhm.
don't study hard enough. lots of university students have stress and, being away from home for the first time and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
But it, it was left to me to accept that that's just who I am.
Hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So, and what a terrible, I can completely relate to that experience. You're just launching into your own life and
Mhm.
you're derailed. I had the
Yes.
exact same thing happen. I thought I was self-sabotaging because I was weak and I just wanted to be a baby forever. Didn't want to do my adult life. I didn't know. I
Yeah.
went to a psychiatrist when I was 19 because I was bulimic and lots of anxiety and insomnia.
Mm.
And I didn't tell the psychiatrist about the sexual abuse because I thought she would pin everything on the sexual abuse of me as where everything stemmed from, which is exactly true. But
Yes.
I thought that she would, that would be an example of me blaming someone else, my stepfather, for
Right.
all my travails and failings. And I didn't want to do that. I needed to own my failure. At least I could be responsible for that
Hmm.
in a weird control uh, bid. I don't know. I can't explain it even now. But somehow I wouldn't even allow myself to receive help, though I was going to get it.
Hmm.
Too deep
Yeah.
in the shame still to really get help.
Well, and I think for us, there's a disconnect because when you have sexual abuse as a child and everyone is denying the effect, I went into a type of denial as well. I wasn't happy, but I couldn't connect it. I was told just go back to school, just, do your studies, do your homework and all, and don't pay attention to any of that. So that's what I tried to do.
Mhm.
And so there was that disconnect. Okay, this happened, but this is me now.
Mhm.
What connects the two? And obviously, trauma connected the two,
Mhm.
but I didn't know that. How do you know that when you're 14, 15, 16? You don't.
That's right.
Um, yeah.
Well, can I ask then, when did you feel this reconnection start? Like, how did you start to put together the pieces and when?
Oh gosh, that's really hard to
Because
pinpoint
it was so
because
gradual.
it was so gradual. And it certainly, my first book came out in 2015, 16, sorry. And I have a little section in there where I talk about how I wasn't supposed to reveal what was going on. I was just supposed to keep it down, and that I then was able to say, well, I think the reason I couldn't deal with my bad marriages very well was because I was trained at an early age to just don't talk, don't just deny that there's anything bad happening. My parents certainly wouldn't have said shut down, but that's what I did. So I shut down my own connection to my own feelings. And
Mhm.
it wasn't until I was writing that first book about my bad marriages and why I made these bad choices that it suddenly occurred to me that I was taught from an early age uh, to just shove everything down. And that's what I did. And when I got these vibes, if you will, that my two husbands were not the best guys in the world,
Yes.
um, I felt it was up to me to fix them. Um, it wasn't about whether I was happy or not.
Mhm.
Because when was the last time I was happy? I didn't even
Mhm.
know what that meant.
Right. I can
Um,
relate. Mhm.
Yeah, so I would say it was sometime when my mother was ill, and she got ill in 2010. So sometime between then and my first book coming out, I did start to connect that keeping down my feelings with my bad choices.
Mm.
And the keeping down of my feelings was about the sexual abuse and the
Mhm.
school I went to.
Mhm. You also trained as a psychologist, and was
Yes.
that in that same time frame?
1991 is when I got my final certificate to say that I was a fully accredited psychologist. By that time, I was in my early 40s. So I had done a number of other things before that, but
Right.
that's when I became a psychologist.
I just was asking because I was wondering what, if there was a certain field that you were interested in, what drew you to it? Was it your habit of fixing and helping?
Yes.
Yeah.
And also, I'm really intrigued by personalities
Mm.
and how we end up being the people we are.
Right. So you
And
were already doing an investigation into yourself. You just didn't know it was
I
you.
didn't, but I didn't know it. I
Ah, yeah.
didn't know that I was trying to find out why I was like I was.
Uh-huh.
Um, this was about other people.
Yeah. Mhm. But and I can relate to that as well. The idea that I don't know what would make me happy, so I might as well do something I know will make someone happy. I can't,
Right.
right? So
Yeah.
that can be quite a trap. And I just also really resonate with you describing your I guess absorbing the messages from family and the community, where
Mhm.
you start to be your own gatekeeper. You're the one locking the door to the cage. Um, you learn the lessons so well, and that carries on
Well, I think,
those adult relationships.
yeah, yeah, and I think, well, I probably already mentioned that it's not conscious. I mean, when you're sent back to a situation that is harmful to you, and I know that's happened to both of us, though the situations were different. The only way of coping with that is to put up a type of armor and just go through the motions. People want to see that I'm okay, so
Mhm.
I'm okay. I get really good marks, and that shows my parents that everything is fine. I don't speak out in school, so my high school teachers thought I was really mature.
Mhm.
Actually, the opposite was true. I couldn't deal with very much of anything.
Mhm.
So I kept my nose to the grindstone. I did well in school. I wrote for the school newspaper. I worked on the school library committee. I did all those things that made me look okay.
Exemplary.
Yeah,
Yeah, I get that too.
yeah. So that's how you cope. But you don't even know, you don't do those things consciously. You don't say, well, I had child sexual abuse, so therefore I'm going to do this and make my parents proud and my teachers proud. It doesn't work like that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I remember asking myself the question, wasn't that long ago actually, what would I be doing with my life, with my days, if I knew I was enough? Because the drive of it is a human thing to feel not good enough. I've discovered that's not just survivors of sexual abuse's children,
Right, right,
but
sure.
it's definitely to the power of 10 with survivors of abuse, this sense of never enough and
Right.
just
Yeah.
trying always, and the energy then that goes into that mask, in your case of an exemplary accomplished person, really that energy is getting all tied up in the mask and there's nothing left over to feed that authentic self.
Yeah, and I did that mask really well. I described that in my first book, The Full Catastrophe. I was like, in fact, I used the metaphor of those old Western towns where you would have these great big facades in the front, but then you would go in the door and it was just a little tiny hut. But when you look down the main street, it looked like all these tall buildings that were very impressive. And that's who I was.
Oh,
Yeah, I was the little tiny building behind the big facade.
Now, I'm hoping that at some point, when you started to discover the authentic you, those building materials could still be used. Like they could be used to make the, right? It's not like you just had to
Yeah,
discard all of that. You could rebuild using so much of what you'd gained, which was valuable.
except I did throw out a bunch of black sequin dresses because that was part of the look. Because I had to look successful. I had so many wool suits when I lived in England, you wouldn't believe it. And matching bag and shoes and, dressed to the nines.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
I
that takes
was
a
sequin.
lot of effort and money. Jeez,
Yeah, yeah, to produce that image.
glamour.
Yeah.